it is almost impossible for founders to be objective. 90% of startups fail. Actually, the number is probably higher than that.
Charles Geringser, founder of Linked VA Now.
Specializes in sales initiatives, acquisitions, and exits. He leads the next generation of direct marketing innovation.
As a founder, it's hard to take criticism and the tough love that you might hear from staff, co-founders, investors. And so in order to be successful as an entrepreneur, you have to have an incredibly thick skin. You have to be very resilient. If you truly believe in your vision, you have to prove it out. Without that, you have almost no chance of success. Businesses can achieve sustainability. They can pay for themselves. And I think the number one key ingredient is that.
The Content Capitalist Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Content Capitalist Podcast. Today I've got a guest with me, Charles Geringser. Now, I'm looking over what he's done, and he's helped some companies pre-IPO that have gone pretty big. We'll talk about that in a second. He's gone through media companies, through tech companies, and now he's working on something really cool in social media, especially in the business sector. And I think that what we're going to talk about today is going to leave you with a few things. Number one, some of like the stuff that people actually have to go through in order to get where they are. And number two is like what's actually working today in terms of like connecting and leveraging your media, your social presence, and anything it takes to help your business to grow. So Charles, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken. I'm happy to be here. Happy to share.
Perfect. Charles, could you get us started by letting us know, like right now, what is the thing you're most excited about? What's that project you're working on? And then what I want to do after that is back up a little bit to what was the path that brought you here and all the juicy details in between. But we'll start with, what is it right now?
Yeah, I mean, right now, I'm a partner in a venture studio based in California. And so within our portfolio of companies that we have invested in, we actually have a number of unique and interesting software as a service platforms, digital marketplaces. But late last year, we actually launched a new initiative that focuses on the opportunities that exist on LinkedIn, right, as a platform. LinkedIn is a very powerful place to do business. It is a social channel, but it is unique in that going all the way back to 2008 in its genesis, it has remained absolutely true to form that it is a place to do business. In fact, when people share birthday wishes and, kids, projects and things like that on LinkedIn, they kind of get shunned. Like, hey, why is that here? This is the place to do business. And so its users are even pretty adamant about maintaining that purity. And just last month, the platform eclipsed 1 billion monthly active users. So, I mean, it is a global phenomena, and it is the place to do business. Now, that being said, I came into some knowledge last year. It was actually a Pew Research Studies initiative about usage of LinkedIn and how the users feel about their efforts. And the net output of that research was that 97% of the people on LinkedIn do not believe they are using it correctly or believe that they have an inferior profile or professional presence. And so I've known this for some time, and I've always made LinkedIn lead generation and lead nurturing a real pillar of my own personal business workflows, but I'm in the minority. And so knowing this and then reading this research, attending a number of live events late last year, I had an epiphany that I needed to take my great technology and my ability to effectively account manage at scale and marry the two into a new initiative, which would be a platform as a service play called Linked VA Now. And so that's my exciting new initiative today, and that's the one that we are using to help predominantly entrepreneurs and business owners on LinkedIn really galvanize their presence and increase yields. And those yields for most of the folks we work with, lead generation and optimization, but also for network growth. So that's kind of my big why, at least here in the first half of 2024.
Amazing. As you're going through this, and you said you've been on LinkedIn for some time, I know that LinkedIn was acquired just a few years ago by Microsoft, I believe, right? How do you feel that changed things in that culture? Or because this is the first time I've heard someone say it like you did, that the culture of the community on LinkedIn is really focused on business. And Microsoft, again, is a brand that's very, very business centric. You know, they do corporate installations and corporate, everything is corporate, right? So do you think that that helped to further cement their position as the business platform, or was there also other things going on?
You know, when Microsoft acquired LinkedIn, I thought at the time that it was a no-brainer, right? Because Microsoft was the king of all kings in business software, and LinkedIn was the place to do business. Truth be told, I don't think Microsoft thoroughly planned out what their plan would be with respect to LinkedIn. At the time, LinkedIn was predominantly a free-to-use platform with a certain minority of users paying a premium for a premium level service. And then, of course, it had an advertising network, which to this day, continues to be its primary revenue stream. And so, Microsoft's not an advertising company, right? Microsoft's not a business and recruiting company. And these are really the things that LinkedIn has been harnessed over the years to do. So then I thought, well, maybe Microsoft will use LinkedIn to sell more product, right? Or whatever the case might be. And lo and behold, no initiative, to my knowledge, ever been launched that really combines the two. So Microsoft's interests in LinkedIn, as far as I can tell, are largely passive. Now, one of the major things that did happen, and this happened about 3 years ago, is Microsoft did institute a pretty hard crossover from manual network management, teams that would manage the LinkedIn network, to Microsoft AI, taking over account reviews and the like. And so in 2021, you had this shudder on the platform where tens of millions of avid users were getting their accounts shut down for no particular good reason, and not outside of terms and conditions, on LinkedIn. But for whatever reason, here, you roll in the AI, the somewhat untested account review process. And so LinkedIn had this real midlife crisis. And so a lot of these super users were getting very frustrated with the platform. And so over the last couple of years, they've tacked it back to more, human oversight over the algorithms, and so on and so forth. So the system has somewhat come back to normal over the last year.
I want to get back more into Linked VA now in a second. Mm-hmm. That's funny. I said Linked VA now in a second. But I'm looking here. You've done a lot of things, and I want to go all the way back to how did you first start getting into entrepreneurship? What was that thing that sparked that interest for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty fortunate coming out of college in the 90s. I had some corporate gigs lined up. I had an opportunity to go work for one of the largest ad agencies on the West Coast, Chiat Day, coming out of school. And the day before I was supposed to start that job, I was offered a commission-only position at a media company in the role of advertising sales. And I took a look at the illustration for how much money I could make in that job versus a salary job at an ad agency, and there was just no comparison. It was 4 times the income potential. So I ran the rough math, and I said, if I really do this even half as well as I think I could, I'll be able to pay off my student loans in 2.5 years. That was my obsession coming out of college, was now I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. How do I pay it all off as quickly as possible? Which in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have done, because it was some of the cheapest money I ever got my hands on. But, that was just where my mindset was. So I took the leap of faith in myself and went to this, commission-only position, selling advertising. And over the course of the first few years of my professional career, I was able to ascend all the way up through the ranks on the advertising side of the business. And eventually I was the publisher of a pretty large newspaper in the Los Angeles market, and running both, the advertising and sales side, as well as the editorial and design and distribution side of the business. I mean, it was and in a lot of ways, that company let me operate as a CEO, sort of as kind of charting my own course. So I kind of got a subsidized taste of what it would be like to be my own business owner. because I had a great company that I was working for that really gave me a lot of autonomy, even at a pretty young age.
And what was that time frame from when you took that job to became, where?
Yeah, mid 90s to early 2000s is when I was doing that. So I was very much involved in the publishing community in Southern California, and our newspapers were winning awards, and it was a really unique time. But those were, those are definitely, it was a different era, and the emergence of, in particular, the Craigslist free classified advertising marketplace really took direct aim at the traditional publishing industry. And so the greatest profit center for not only my newspapers, but all daily newspapers as well, all over really the planet, is in those classified ads. And when Craigslist emerged as a real force to be reckoned with, I mean, that business just, it eviscerated overnight. And so it really wasn't there really wasn't a long-term play, in particular because a lot of the mindset at the time in the publishing industry was, okay, the internet, how are we going to monetize this? Oh, let's create a paywall, right? You still see that today, and there's a lot of frustration that comes with that, and it's not a sustainable or successful model. It has not been for just about any of the media giants. So, and we're talking like 2002, 2003 at the time, and not a lot has changed. So that was kind of my cue to look and evaluate at getting out of the business. And so I diversified into some other media positions, other regional publishing groups, some of the major national broadcast organizations. I would advise different sales teams. I would get involved in markets that were underperforming and kind of parachute in to help the teams kind of recenter and then parachute out. And I did that for a number of years. And so most of that work was entrepreneurial in nature. But I really do think that I owe my roots in entrepreneurship to my earliest employers, because they really let me run my own show at the time.
And as a child or teenager, was that already starting to emerge? Like, were you the one selling candy, buying it at Costco and selling it in the hallways and stuff? Or did any of that kind of behavior emerge as a child?
Okay. So I have a funny story about that. I'm glad you asked. I haven't talked about this in years, but so I was probably 7 or 8, and I grew up in Southern California, out back at the house. We had a lemon tree. And I mean, it wasn't a particularly big tree, but it produced a ton of lemons. And we could only use so many as a household. And so I asked my folks, I'd seen like Snoopy and Charlie Brown doing a lemonade stand. Like, is that a real thing? Can I do that? And they were like, sure, that'd be awesome. Do it. Go for it. So I harvested lemons and literally made lemonade and started a lemonade stand. Now, millions of children have done this, right? For a lot of kids, it's their first entrepreneurial endeavor. But I actually kind of took it a step further. I crafted a mobile lemonade stand. So I actually took a couple of moving dollies, and upon those dollies, with the help of my dad, we built this lemonade stand on wheels. And the reason I did that is because I didn't want to get stuck with my lemonade stand just in front of my house or at the corner when it might not be the best place that particular day to actually do business. And I would actually roll my lemonade stand around the neighborhood on the weekends to wherever a yard sale might be happening, and sold my lemonade in that fashion. And so it actually was a pretty predictable revenue stream for me in my earliest days, to the point where at 9 years old, I went down to the old California Federal Savings and Loan and actually opened an account and started saving money. And I wasn't even in double-digit years at that time, but that was my big innovation, was an actual mobile business.
Brilliant. And your parents were supportive of this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, they were always, always there, always present. And, I was given, I think, I look back now on my childhood, I didn't have a ton of chores. I was never like overburdened that way. So I had enough free time to do things like start a little business. I was pretty into computers early on. I had a lot of time to investigate and get involved in technology. And I played a ton of sports as a teenager. So I definitely was not encumbered, by the folks. They gave me a lot of time to myself that I was able to cultivate different hobbies, talents, and interests.
I'm curious about something. You've gone through, well, Lemonade Stand and media, and then tech, early days with Roblox, and then the restaurant SaaS business, right? And now Linked VA. Now, these are they're not necessarily like in one vertical. They're kind of in different categories. And I see this as a certain pattern in certain people. For me, I've done multiple businesses too. I was in the event space doing large scale personal development events. Then I had a videography business. Now I've got a digital media agency, and now I'm launching a new business where it's a hardware invention that I made, and we're working on getting that going. And I'm wondering, like, do you see patterns where there's certain personalities that do better with constantly innovating and creating new things, and certain people who just need one big project that's going to last them longer than their lifetime? And in your history, what are you noticing with the people around you and yourself?
It's so funny because in my professional, career, there have been times when I've been ensconced in fairly well-established businesses, kind of long-term horizon, event horizon for the business. And then I'm thinking at that time, boy, this gets kind of dull. The days tend to be much like yesterday. Each day is like yesterday. I want to do more startup stuff. I want to be in the early stages because that's so much more invigorating. And then there are times when I'm in the startup phase and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, got to start all over again. I just wish we had the long-term, event horizon, and we were in more well-established businesses. So I say it cuts both ways. There's so much that is attractive and romantic about the startup environment, but the God's honest truth is it's 90% of startups fail. I mean, actually, the number's probably higher than that. And there's a reason for that, because it is almost impossible for founders to be objective. And as open-minded as you might be as a founder, it's hard to take the criticism and the tough love that you might hear from staff, co-founders, investors. And so in order to be successful as an entrepreneur, to be successful in the arenas that I'm playing in now with SMB SaaS, you have to have an incredibly thick skin. You have to be very resilient. If you truly believe in your vision, you have to prove it out. I mean, businesses can achieve, sustainability. They can pay for themselves. That doesn't mean that they'll be runaway successes. I think the number one key ingredient is that resiliency on the part of the founder. Without that, you have almost no chance of success.
Mm. In your case, when you shift lanes, so to speak, do you feel like historically that was like market driven? Was it passion driven, or was it more opportunity driven?
My passion, when I think about the work that I've done, going back to my college years, almost everything I've done when I think of the business side, right? Because I'm thinking back to my publishing career. We helped small businesses. The vast majority of our advertisers were small business owners, restaurant owners, nightclub owners, furniture stores, car dealers. Those were our advertisers. We had national advertisers too, big brands, but the vast majority of the revenue in those early days in the 90s was coming from SMBs. And so my transition out of publishing and media and into technology, SMBs are actually the linchpin in all of the businesses that I'm involved in today. You mentioned the Restaurant Heroes. That's a business I'm still involved with. It's part of our portfolio. And that is it is basically a business in a box. We sell to entrepreneurs where they can go out and create a consultancy to restaurants in their community. And it was actually born during the pandemic, when restaurants were one of the only industries that were empowered to be, open, right, considered essential, and yet so many restaurants closed, right? 25% of the U.S. market shuttered, closed forever, right? 250,000 restaurants in 2020 and 2021. And what replaced those restaurants, what emerged is sort of a new class of restaurant, virtual restaurants, right? Digital only brands, secondary, third brands run in a ghost kitchen style. You could be like, a Thai restaurant in the front of the house, you could be a Mexican restaurant running out of the back of the house, right? At the same time. And so Restaurant Heroes, my business was really founded on what I knew would happen, which would be a restaurant renaissance. And so again, SMB focused, individual restaurant owners, that was our primary market for that business. But my roots in that business, born in 2020, go back to 1996 when I was creating handheld dining guides in West Los Angeles. And so even though I've switched around a lot, my lanes are all on the same highway. And that highway is the SMB highway, for sure.
So tell me about Roblox. You were involved pretty early stage, went to IPO. And is it because they were a small business at the time? Or tell me about this.
Roblox is a non sequitur because my kids, my daughter who's about to graduate from college, was an avid Roblox player, creator, both on the basic consumer side and then as a creator. And so it was actually her interest in the platform way before it was a public company that got me interested. I had had some success with our venture operation. So I had some discretionary opportunities to get involved in some bigger initiatives. And so I was able to get involved with Roblox from a investment standpoint when they were pre-IPO. That participation and actually attending the equivalent of shareholder events led me to a relationship with the C-suite. And because of my experience in the SMB growth marketplace, their desire to create a virtual marketplaces and recreate IRL on the platform, I was tapped to sort of help them with some of their early phase rollouts of NFTs and things of that nature. So basically, I've served on a number of committees advising the company.
Yeah. So what do you do? Like, I saw my kids were playing Roblox too. I thought it was like, I didn't know why they're interested, but they were obviously, and there's an untapped market there. So when an inspiration strikes you like that, do you just go to Google, figure out who's the CEO and just give them a call? Or do you bring that to your team and figure out like a proposal and then approach them? Walk me through that process, because this is new territory for me.
Yeah, well, for a company like Roblox, again, when it was privately held, there's actually a platform called SharesPost where you can actually buy private investors' investments in emerging technology companies, or really any company that has a plan to go private or public, you can actually acquire those shares in a secondary market, and it's a private transaction. So
that's brilliant.
You're not buying public stock, you're buying someone else's private shares. And so what that does is get you access, right? You're now on the cap table. I mean, infinitely tiny, percentage, but you're there. And because you're there, you have certain rights, and that gives you access to all sorts of things. You are now on the inside.
Oh, wait, I got to write that down. What's that website again you told me?
SharesPost.
SharesPost.
Yeah. So this
is very interesting.
Yeah, that's one of many. I mean, there's another platform called Republic.
So you just went out and bought the shares without actually having like a face-to-face meeting with them first. So you invested, but then how did you build that relationship with the C-suite?
Yeah. So I worked initially through investor relations. They got to know me, and then they made the introductions to lead to them inviting me to participate in their pre-IPO initiatives in terms of evaluating non-traditional revenue opportunities, right? You weren't just going to sell Robux to every user. You had to find other ways to turn the platform into a money-making initiative that would reflect favorably on the street, right, as a publicly traded company.
Yeah. You just gave me a great idea to really boost my online impressiveness. I just go buy $1 each of every pre-IPO company, and then I can put it on my resume wherever they IPO, pre-IPO investor. Well, of course that would be not what I do, but I had no idea you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, the being invited to advise. I mean, almost all.
Well, that's a different level, of course.
Yeah, and I mean, almost all publicly traded companies have a board of directors, right? Very official. Very formal, but they also have advisory boards that you don't necessarily know about. You'd have to read the quarterly filings, the annual reports to know that these other committees and advisory groups even exist. And oftentimes the advisory boards do come from the investors that are involved with the company. So even on a small scale, it can happen.
I want to move into talking about your current project, but one last question about, this, all your past activities is, you told me a second ago about how the most important thing in a startup or in any entrepreneurship venture is the resilience of the owner, founder, or CEO. What is it for you that continues driving you? And I don't know if you watched the show Better Call Saul, the spinoff from Breaking Bad. Yeah. Do you remember that scene when he's got to carry the $7 million in 2 duffel bags through the desert and he's walking with the hitman, Mike? And he asks Mike, because it was so tough, he just felt like giving up and dying, like he didn't care. And this is Saul Goodman, right? And he asks Mike, why do you do this? Like, how can you take another step? And Mike said, and he said it in a very elegant or an powerful way, is because he knows he's got his kid, his grandkid, and his daughter-in-law who's waiting for him and loves him, and nothing bar death will stop him from continuing to do what he does. And that's why he'll never, ever give up. And I think that everybody's got their thing. But as entrepreneurs, there's got to be something we're working toward in order to have that thick skin, in order to handle all that criticism, the failures, the problems that seem unsolvable. Curious, what is it for you?
Early in my career, prior to getting married and having kids, my motivation was to find opportunities that I could be passionate about. And so it wasn't always about the money. It was early on because I told the story about paying off my student loans, right? That was important to me at the time. To be honest, in the publishing industry, our product, the stories that the writers and editors would create, actually would change lives. We were like a force for good in the community. And we did some groundbreaking award-winning editorial work. Some of my writers were, we didn't ever win a Pulitzer, but we were finalists for the Pulitzer a couple of times. It's probably the most prestigious journalism award out there. And I was very proud of that work. And so in my early career, like in my 20s, that was pretty heavy, because the advertising dollars funded the enterprise investigative journalism we were doing. So that was a big motivating factor. I married my high school sweetheart. We started a family. And from that point forward, like Saul Goodman, in my case and his cohorts, my motivation really shifted to, my family, quality of life. What type of a job could I be doing where I could call my own shots, make an environment where I could be there for my kids, coach them in volleyball, which is something our family's really passionate about, something I've always been passionate about, take them to the golf course once in a while, go on the occasional family trip. That was what has been most important to me. And, I think I've done a pretty good job with that. As I shared earlier, I've got a daughter who's about to graduate from college. I've got another daughter, a younger daughter that is in middle school. And, I've been able to be, an ever-present, character in their life, not just dad locked away working or on business trips, but actually present, going to all the volleyball matches, attending the school plays, things of that nature. I've never missed anything. I place their calendar on mine and then I plan accordingly. And I'm really lucky because I've got partners and I've got employees who are really loyal. And so I've surrounded myself with people that I can count on when I've got other priorities to tend to.
Thank you for sharing that. And that just opened up another question, which is, up until this point, what's been like the biggest challenge, like a problem that you really struggled to solve? Maybe it was a company that eventually failed. I don't know. And what happened as a result of that? Would you be okay sharing that?
Yeah, there have been a few of those over the years. Our model is to create companies that have value even if they fail. And so what I'm saying by that is, like you mentioned, you're getting involved in hardware, right? Physical product. So in initiatives like those, I'd want to get fully issued patents. I would want to create, defensible moats around the business so that even if we weren't successful, we had inherent value so that at the end of the day, if we decided that the cost benefit of keeping the business alive directly was untenable, we could sell the business to a competitor or to a strategic. So even when I failed, like we've managed to do something with those businesses. So the most common thing in our industry, kind of the small end of venture, is you'll take your widget and roll it up into somebody else's bigger widget and then typically take their equity in exchange for your equity. So it lives on. It's almost like organ donation, kind of the crazy analogy. But to try to create businesses that have value.
By doing that, you own a portion of their business. Therefore, your net worth or your cash flow could benefit, right? Is that what you mean by that?
Your cash flow is not going to benefit, right? Because you're just holding on the paper. But if that company, takes off, there's a second shot. Whether they go public or they get acquired, whatever capital event happens, there's a chance. You don't just die. You don't just go away. So creating companies that have intellectual, proprietary systems and technology when you're creating a company is to build sort of defensible value. I probably receive like 1,200 pitch decks a year. Terms of investor, there are small companies out there looking for angel investors or Series A investors, early stage. And then it's remarkable how often I'll go back to one of these from a year ago, 2 years ago, and they're just done. The phone number's disconnected. The website is like defunct. And then I wonder what happened to, those investors. And so those are the unfortunate tales of early stage startups. Is it's a high failure rate. And I don't think, if you go into this without this obsession about a defensible, value, you could end up, as just a footnote. And so creating opportunity within spaces where there are clear paths of opportunity, where you have strategic partners that you can align your product and service with, competitors in the space. To me, those are going to be opportunities that, will realize value and realize a return on investment.
Any one particular instance that you can share about where
we're all privately
where you
held.
did face these difficulties?
There's not a lot I can talk about publicly because
I can respect that.
It's not out there, but
I can respect that.
But I'll tell you, like Linked VA Now, my new project and obsession was born out of a problem. And the problem was I had corporate users of my LinkedIn technology, which is the underpinning, platform that Linked VA lives on now. It's a separate company with a separate brand called Castanet. And very sophisticated technologists get a lot out of that platform. But for the average business owner, say you're like an insurance brokerage, or you're in commercial lending, or you're a nonprofit development officer, you're not technologically inclined enough to use my somewhat complicated software. Unless you really devote yourself to it. So what do I do for those customers of mine? I don't want to just sell them a login to sophisticated software that has a good training module, because I know that generally speaking, they're going to use it for a month or two, pay for it for a month or two, and then they're out, right? But if I created a platform with a white glove level of service and a direct account management, now the technology is underpinning, but they don't have to run it. They can just focus on the outputs. So watching individual smaller businesses struggle with my tech helped me create this platform that is now very successful and kind of our growth story for 2024.
Love it. Well, let's jump into Linked VA now. First question I have is, what's the VA stand for?
Virtual assistant. A better word now in retrospect would have been RA, remote assistant, because in my venture studio, we've got 16 companies in the portfolio. And in our business development SOPs, standard operating procedure, we advocate for well-established LinkedIn profiles, for the principals, certainly for the business development teams. And with those profiles, we plug in our proprietary technology so that we can build those networks and create, predictable lead generation on those platforms. And so this internal SOP, this internal system that I created became the basis for a in-market product and a recurring service model. And so Linked, kind of an homage to LinkedIn, VA, virtual assistant now, meaning if we take on your account today, you will see outputs now. So it's an immediate factor. And I say that because I've worked with, over the years, many agencies that do social media management. And oftentimes there's a lot of planning and waiting, and I've never been satisfied with that. So our systems are designed that the day you onboard with our team is the day you receive your first outputs, your first leads, connections, whatever your goal is in terms of your KPIs. We are looking to deliver that immediately.
Love that. Maybe I can improve our social media management services by taking a few tips from you. I'd like to ask a few things. I admittedly, and I don't know if you checked out my LinkedIn, I rarely use it. And I've done a ton of lead gen through Instagram, through Facebook, and YouTube a tiny bit, not that much, but Instagram and Facebook have been the bread and butter for us. And LinkedIn, for some reason, maybe it's just because it doesn't excite me, it doesn't get me interested. Maybe that's why my attention is not going there. But I have clients who are crushing it and, pulling in like 7 figures a month from, business off of LinkedIn, multiple 7 figures, some of them, and using the content that we provide for them because we're a content creation agency. Now, the way I understand it, LinkedIn is really about, finding employment. It's about finding prospects, and pretty much those are the two ultimate goals. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, if you are a business owner on LinkedIn, you're using it to fill positions. So it certainly is a recruiting platform, to be sure. Because if you think about it, most profiles look like a resume. That's sort of the first and foremost use of LinkedIn. But again, I kind of come back to the purity of the channel. LinkedIn is for business, right? It's not for selling, concert tickets. It's not for doing, food influencer videos. I mean, you're not going to see that on LinkedIn. I mean, you're going to see that all over Instagram. You're going to see that all over, I don't know about Facebook is really, it's a platform in decline. I mean, Instagram is, if there's growth on Meta, it's Instagram. TikTok is certainly a massive emerging force. We advertise on it, promote on it, and see great results. So when we talk about LinkedIn, it's the purity of the environment that is, something to keep in mind first and foremost. But you're absolutely right. You can find quality, employees through LinkedIn, through their recruiter iteration. In Sales Navigator, you can utilize it to build very basic funnels for network growth, because the first thing you have to do is connect with somebody. Once you've connected, you can now have, direct communication, because until you connect, you can't have direct communication. You can use their in-mail product, but in-mail may as well be called junk mail, right? It is the digital equivalent of junk mail. So in-mail's not the greatest. It can work, but more often than not, it's not the best path. The best path, in my estimation, is to create genuine connections through the invitation to connect feature. And then as soon as you can, pull that conversation off of LinkedIn and into your primary CRM. That's the key. You don't own your social profile. You don't own your profile on Instagram. You don't own it on Facebook. You don't own it on LinkedIn.
I've got a question about this. Is obviously, in order for linked VA now to work, there had to be a lot of people doing things wrong so that you can help them solve these issues. So what are the biggest things that you notice that they're doing wrong?
Well, the number one thing, and you said it yourself, is you just don't pay attention to LinkedIn. You have a LinkedIn profile, you set it up some time ago. Chances are you may not even know the email that the alerts from LinkedIn are going to. It could have been from 2 or 3 emails ago. And that is the most common reality for a LinkedIn user. So at the end of the day, think about it. If you're out there trying to do business in any capacity, there's a fair chance that your prospects, people who are considering doing business with you, are going to look you up on LinkedIn. And if you have no photo, or your photo is, not particularly well done, or you don't have a good hero image, or your current position is not updated, these are going to be problems for you. And so a poorly crafted LinkedIn profile is a business liability. And so that's the first thing. And our business isn't about LinkedIn profile improvement. We do that as part of the natural order of our business. But that is usually the beginning of the conversation with someone, is to audit their profile, take a look at 8 different parameters that we believe to be important, and measure you against profiles that we know have been successfully deployed. And so there is typically some type of action plan related to just improving the basic profile.
Can I ask some advice for myself in
Sure.
this situation? Recently, I've been working on rebranding a few things, and mostly because there's been some market confusion. People are wondering hey, are you a coach? Are you an agency owner? Are you an inventor? Are you a speaker? I'm all the above. Are you a podcaster? So I'm working with somebody to try to bring everything together under one brand. And ultimately what I want is to have that, the info card on Google. If someone Googles my name, then it's all well organized in the info card, right? Now, LinkedIn is something that up until now, I just haven't really seen leads or sales come from, probably because I'm not paying attention to it. But also my content I produce a lot of content from this podcast, from tips and tricks about, tech and business. And that generally helps drive engagement on Instagram and Facebook, which turns into leads when people explore just a tiny bit deeper. But on LinkedIn, we publish the same content, and it's not just cute stuff. It's it's about tech and business, and setting up home studios and things like that. And I was thinking, well, because it's getting so poorly engaged there, maybe I should just pull everything off and then just have one post that says, hey, this is my LinkedIn profile, but I'm not really active here. Check me out on these other places. Now, you're probably, when you're hearing this, I'm imagining it's like nails on a chalkboard, Ken, big mistake. How do you suggest I look at this? I see there's 2 paths. Number one is to create a whole new other type of content specifically for LinkedIn, or does poorly engaged content even really matter? If it's, if I'm getting less than 1,000 views on my videos, then to me, that's a little bit embarrassing, but then I don't know, on LinkedIn, do people even care?
I would think that things like views, like counts matter less on LinkedIn than they do on other platforms. Now, the power of LinkedIn, though, is there is curation on the feed, right? That is being pushed out to regular users. So what they see as they scroll, because they can do the same type of scrolling that they do on other social platforms. And so, for you to have content go viral, you're not entirely in control of that. So the chance that you could post something, a tips and tricks video or something along those lines on LinkedIn, it may have an opportunity to go viral there, where it may not have that opportunity to do it on an Instagram or a TikTok. So LinkedIn, I've had a few posts where LinkedIn's grabbed it, and, I might get, 50 to 100 likes and a couple dozen comments on something. But I've had posts where I've had 25,000 likes and 6,000 comments. And, not surprisingly, there were things that weren't just my regular everyday business. Like, I invested in a female-founded startup fund And when I posted that announcement that I'm proud to be an investor in a fund that is going to focus on female founders, historically underrepresented groups, I mean, I got a lot of commendation for that from folks on LinkedIn, mostly people I don't even know, just saying, "Oh, good for you. You're an old white guy, and look, you're investing in this thing." And I'm like, to me, it was just an investment, and I announced it, and that was that. But it to this day was probably my most viral post. I didn't plan it that way. It just worked out that way.
The political climate will just give you the updraft every now and then, right?
Yeah, and I'd really, and then, I've posted other things about like, one of our portfolio companies securing a major investment and the sort of thing that everybody wants to do. And then, very little virality on that particular post. So you have to remember, at least in my case, I'm not as much focused on the content side of what you might or might not do on LinkedIn. I am focused on your profile, right? Because that's sort of your calling card. That's the thing that people see. And then based on what they see there, they either accept your invitation or reject your invitation, right? And on LinkedIn, there's not only reject the invitation to connect, but you can also tell LinkedIn, I don't know this person. And if you get enough of those, you actually can find yourself in a position where you're throttled and you're not allowed to, even send enough invites out to connect. So it can be a challenge. Our system, our team focuses on first connection messaging. So the first thing we do is build up your network. Who do you want to connect with on LinkedIn? Who, if you could choose who your next 1,000 connections will be, what are the types of job titles? What are the types of businesses they're involved with? And then we set our sights on that so that we grow that first and then turn the communication and the conversations that happen with those new connections into the outputs. So we're not just posting a really well-crafted video and hoping that it gets traction and creates clout, and then indirectly you're going to get some action from that. We're trying to connect to Bob over here, who happens to own, a media buying service because you want to do more business with those types. And then you make a genuine, direct, first-level connection with that person. And then the conversation is, all right, Bob, here's my Calendly. Let's have a coffee, virtual coffee together. And that's what my team does for you. So if you're not doing that for yourself, or you don't have a full or part-time EA, AA who are going to work for you and manage your profile, then you need us. So either do it yourself, hire somebody to do it, or hire us. And that's our role, is to focus exclusively on LinkedIn, focus exclusively on a collaborative set of KPIs, and then see to it that is delivered on a daily basis and reported back to you on a weekly basis. One of the things I instituted with this program is, while we have a dashboard and things that our customers can access on their own, my team every Tuesday sends a physical, it's a digital report, but it's in your inbox, right? Here's the report. This is what we did over the last week. And by doing that, we create complete transparency into our process. And so you're never wondering as a customer, what am I paying for here? What did I actually get? We actually can show you. You have 13 meetings that came as a result of your campaign, or you have 40 new connections. And by sharing that data at such a regular cadence, we've had fantastic customer retention, very low churn, and I'm pretty proud of that. Most of the people in SaaS, advocate the opposite. Only communicate at intervals that are absolutely required. And I chose to go a different direction and communicate far more frequently. The fear in SaaS is if you keep reminding your customer who's not using your service that they have your service, they might cancel, right? Like, how often do you hear from Netflix? Like, never, right? So, I wanted to go in a direction to always do good. And in this case, every Tuesday, my team, we gear up, we have our stand up, and then the reports go out. And we know that when those reports go out, we're going to get a ton of responses. And the overwhelming majority of the responses, and this is going back, we've been at this platform for 9 months, it's positive. it's a lot of thank yous and a lot of love. And so that not only has the primary effect of customer retention, but my team knows that their work is appreciated. And that is actually something, no matter how much you invest as a business owner, you can't fake that. You can't artificially create that for your team. They start hearing it firsthand from customers that their work is well received. I mean, that bolsters them, and you get, committed workers who are passionate about delivering good product.
Amazing. Can you walk me through what could I expect, like the process to be for, let's say, as a new customer? And what I'm thinking is like, okay, I go to have an interview probably with somebody on your team, right? Or fill out a form. There's some kind of financial transaction and an agreement signed. And then there's going to be some optimization or suggestions or consulting around optimizing my current setup, giving your team some kind of access, whether it's through API or otherwise, I'm not sure. And then like me in particular, like my clients, we just recently did the math, and our LTV for our clients is about $280,000, our average. And our monthly contract is usually somewhere between $5,000 and $40,000 a month. So if you were to look at my business and think about how it would benefit me, could you walk me through that? And I think that somebody listening might also just relate to having this experience and seeing if it's a good fit for them.
Yeah. So some of our customers will come to the table. The process is as you just described it. We connect to your profile through API. You give us permissions. We go in. We're never actually in your LinkedIn profile. Our software is relating to it. We will advocate some optimization, not always, but often. And then we do a full onboarding. And that onboarding process involves you articulating your ideal customer targets. And then our team advises back to you, how in the context of LinkedIn searches are we able to deliver that target? And so you may come to us and say, I want more $280,000 LTV customers. They are in these industries, and that's that. Or you may come to us, and as many of our customers do, and they say, I'm looking to break into a new market. I've wanted to do business with more commercial lenders in the Western US. Most of my business is Midwest or East Coast. I want to go more, the Western US. And so they'll come to us with new sort of like beachhead aspirational targets on a market. And so we almost always try to advocate to our customers to channel back to their top customer lists. And we look for, commonality. It's not rocket science, but we're looking for what successful paths you've traveled in the past and then seek to emulate that. The other thing we do is we'll set up that initial campaign during onboarding, but we will switch gears and we will launch new campaigns 3 weeks in, 6 weeks in. If the results are subpar, the numbers aren't, at a level we consider the level of achievement we're accustomed to, we'll advocate for shifts and changes in the strategy.
So I'm also curious, like, where does the handoff point from where your job is done and my team or myself takes over? And what does that look like? Is this just if someone writes an email, then that's where the line is? Or
yeah, it depends on the customer. But we often,
in my case, for example,
we would probably take it all the way to calendaring and actually just booking them for you. But that's not always the case. Oftentimes,
is there a qualification process as well?
We can do that as well. All that goes into the messaging sequence that is part of our setup. So you can think about it in traditional funnels sort of mentality. The difference is you actually have a real life person that is working and account managing on your behalf. So that is the major departure between us and just about everybody else out there that is in this business. There are competitors in our space that charge, $3,000, $4,000 a month for what we do. We're able to do it for $697 a month because I'm already built at scale, right? I have trained account managers who've been doing this for years, know the LinkedIn, schema very well. And so they're people who know the shortest path between A and B. A being nascent, in often user, B being I'm getting a predictable amount of lead flow from my LinkedIn profile now. And so our team's able to do that. Unfortunately, Ken, I've got to jump, but I really enjoyed talking to you, and I appreciate the time.
I really appreciate you, Charles. And for everybody else listening, thanks for listening to the end. Please do check out the links in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, check out the description. And until next week, that's the pod.
No hustle, worship here, we're a different breed. Action is what we got if action is what you need. Content capitalists, we're breaking the mold. Cause the old ways fading, new stories to be told. So content capitalists, get to the prize.